BBC Asian Network.
Mubin Azhar.
Well, people, I hope you've been having a good day. And I bet one thing you did today was eat at some point, and I bet it was delicious. I hope it was delicious. Tonight, we are talking about food fads and particular diets, and we want to separate a lot of the myth from the reality and talk about how you can get to where you want to go if you've got a particular goal in mind. Maybe that involves putting on weight. Maybe it involves cutting down on your weight. Maybe it just involves having an all-round balanced diet and you don't want to change anything specifically. Maybe you just want to know what you should be eating. We've got with us a lovely panel. We've got Juggy, also known as the Indian Body Coach. He's a friend of the show. Juggy, how you doing?
Really good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It is lovely to have you with us. We've got Aarti Bhanderi-Shah, who hasn't been on the show before, have you?
I haven't. Thank you for having me on.
It is lovely to have you with us. She's a nutritionist and dietitian. So you are our expert today. And we've also got Nikhil, a.k.a. Neo10Y. Nick, how you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Can I call you Nick?
Yeah.
I figure we kind of know each other.
We're friends now.
We're friends now,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the second time you've been on the show.
It is.
Aarti, when did you get interested in nutrition?
So
And how?
I was quite a chubby child. I loved eating. I'm from an Indian family. We're a really foodie family. My sister's really into cooking. I loved eating. And I was quite sporty as well. I grew up in the 90s and it was all about kind of Kate Moss, being skinny. And there was that culture that's, being skinny was all part, that was the way to be. And obviously, as we know now, it's all about eating nutrient-dense food. So I sort of grew up in that era where there was quite an unhealthy attitude to health, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about really the era of size zero models
Exactly.
and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, I think people had quite negative body images if they were a bit larger than, because I was quite muscly, I was quite sporty. And so I sort of started to experiment with diets in quite an unhealthy way. I started to, read labels on packets and become quite obsessed with calorie content and stuff.
How old were you at this point?
It's probably sort of in my teens when you're quite vulnerable.
So you're really young.
From quite a young age, yes. And then my mum was in the medical profession and she had a very common sense approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I realised actually eating, sort of diet foods, low fat foods made me feel really rubbish and I didn't have the energy to play the sport that I wanted to. And actually eating healthier, I may not have been skinny, but I had that energy and vitality and it made me realise that connection between eating well and feeling good. And that was really powerful. And so now in my nutrition practice, I really try and kind of reset people's relationship with food because like you say, there's a bit of an obsession about what we're eating and even, it's termed orthorexia where people want to eat perfectly. So for me, it's about people making eating joyful again.
Okay, that's a good way
I use that
to put
term,
it.
eating joyfully and also understanding the nutritional science as well, the macros, the micros, but without getting too sciencey about it, but just bringing together the science and the enjoyment of food and food culture.
How did you work your way back to that point as a teenager? Or maybe it took more, many more years than that. But how did you work your way back to a place where it was perhaps a bit more balanced?
I did a lot of reading. I was very interested in the subject of nutrition. I worked in a pharmacy and that gave me a really good oversight into people that were coming in with weight problems. And I kind of read, I spoke to specialists in the field and sort of my interest grew from there. And I sort of experimented on myself. I probably did try a lot of fads actually, and this is what we're here for, went gluten-free, tried dairy-free, probably tried some crazy diets as well. The maple syrup and lemon one I think Beyonce was doing. So I've tried all the fads.
Was that maple syrup and lemon in water?
I think so, yeah, I remember,
Okay.
yeah. And I've sort of tried all the fads and actually I've realised for me it's a bit more of a common sense approach and being a little bit intuitive and being in touch with how I feel when I eat. And actually I try and encourage my clients as well to have more confidence in themselves and eat a bit more intuitively.
Essentially, what we need to be doing is eating consciously to optimize ourselves. So I think, Aarti, you said nourishment-rich foods or something like that.
Nutrient-dense
There you
foods
go,
that nourish your body
yeah, exactly.
and
I fully agree with
physical
that.
and emotional health.
100%. So basically eating as many colourful vegetables and plants and fruits as possible in order to build your body and your mind in the most optimal way.
There are some broad foundation principles that we know, eat less sugar, eat more vegetables, which you rightly pointed out. And veganism has obviously, really become a really popular way of eating. Veganism, plant-based, kind of similar. And I think that's brilliant for Nicole, but for some people, they feel that they need to eat meat. It's part of their culture, and to sort of, and vegan diets can be really healthy. In fact, quite a lot of my clients that are coming to me are looking to have, a meat-free day in their week. And so I'm kind of helping and supporting. I'm vegetarian myself as well, so I fully appreciate it. In fact, my sister and my brother-in-law turned vegan a couple of years ago, and they're finding it really beneficial for health reasons and environmental reasons. And often people turn to veganism for both those reasons. But I think it's important when you're discussing diet that we're sort of respectful of the choices that other people may make. And I understand all the stuff around, violence and the slaughter of animals, but I think sometimes the language needs to be a little bit tempered.
Okay, I hear that. Juggy, if I could bring you in, because you are very much, I would say, in a world which is about bodybuilding and fitness. And in those circles, do you get a lot of people that are vegan?
I would say more in the health world. I used to be in the bodybuilding world, but massively into the health world. But I've got a massive influx of vegan and vegetarian clients on the back of things like the Game Changers, for example. And having watched the Game Changers, having watched some of these documentaries, having reviewed some of the information that's actually been shared in those documentaries, it's not 100% accurate. However, I'm massively for the vegan diet if you do it properly.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing is, the way that I see it now is that I go to plants as my nutrition. So I'm like, oh my God. So I'll make like salads or wraps or like vegetable dishes, and I'll try and use all 7 colours of the rainbow in as often as I can, because there are lots of charts online. I can't give you like the specifics, but that demonstrate that each of the colours can benefit you in different ways. And I think you guys are both nutritionists.
Aarti, comment on that.
I was going to say, from a nutritional perspective, the reason that veganism, can really work for people is because they do need to focus, like you said, Nicole, on vegetables. And as we know, vegetables are absolutely fantastic for our health, and like you've talked about, eat the rainbow. I say that phrase a lot in my clinics. You've got the all the different phytonutrients and the different colours. So from that perspective, the only thing with veganism is B12. Often vegans need to supplement with B12 because B12 is found in animal and dairy products. There are some really good sort of whole food supplements you can take for B12 as well.
So there are places you can get. You've just got to be really aware.
You need to be mindful of your B12.
Go on, Juggy.
On the vegan diet, I mean, it's very easy to say I'm going to go plant-based, but what do most people do when they go vegan? They go and start eating all these alternative meats, these alternative beef burgers, mainly made from like seitan and, different types of kind of chemically produced or, produced in factories, this, that, and the other.
Oh, it's certainly food that's been processed, isn't it?
So most people aren't saying, I'm going to go vegan and then just eat all 7 colours of the rainbow. And I think that's something that we really need to kind of build awareness of here, is you can be very, very healthy on a vegan diet, but you can also be very unhealthy just as you can be if you eat meat. So just having that balance is important.
Of course. I think we've gone down a particular road with veganism. And Nicola, I just want to know, in terms of the effort that's required, because I think everyone's in agreement that you have to be mindful of what you're eating. So in terms of the effort that's required to make sure, to use Aarti's phrase, you're eating all 7 colours of the rainbow, is it a big effort?
I don't think it's a big effort, but then I have the privilege of living in London and spending a lot of time in New York and LA. So for me, it's really easy in those cities.
So I want to bring in Sunita now. Sunita, welcome to the Asian Network. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm great. Hi to everyone there.
It's lovely to have you with us. So tell us about your own journey with food. I know you've been through a few changes, it's fair to say.
Just a few, yes. So I've got to kind of reverse back a little bit. I've always been big. From birth up until, I'd say, last August. At my biggest, I was topping the scales at 19 stone. You're 19 stone. I stopped weighing myself because I couldn't even see the digits on the scale anymore. I had some surgery in the earlier part of last year. 2018, and as a consequence of that surgery, I was in bed for about 4 weeks, And that was my trigger. That was the moment I thought, I've got to sort my health out. Now, my surgery had nothing to do with my weight. But the fact that I was in bed and was dependent on my children, it triggered an emotion in me that I needed to make a change in regards to my health. I can only talk from my own experience, Nadine, and I think because I was overweight, I didn't feel that I deserved anything.
Right.
I didn't feel that I had any self-worth, so I kind of just accepted everything that was thrown at me. When I flipped that and I thought, hang on a minute, I am bloody worth it, and I am going to make this change, and I'm not making it for anybody else, I'm making it for myself. I get lots and lots of, sisters and friends asking me, what diet are you doing? And the first thing I say to them is, the minute you approach it as a diet, I feel you're setting yourself up for failure. Don't approach it as a diet. Approach it as a new way of connecting with food. For me now, food is not my denominator. I am in control. It fuels my body. That's all it does.
That's brilliant. So let me bring in Aarti here. This idea that the word diet perhaps in itself can be quite problematic. Are we viewing it the wrong way?
I completely agree with what Sunita's done. First of all, it's phenomenal, her transformation and how she's managed to make that journey and achieve her health goals is absolutely incredible. So well done, Sunita, on that front.
Thank you.
But yeah, totally, I completely agree. The word diet, it implies short-termism, and what we need to do with weight loss is changing she perfectly put it, resetting your relationship with food. A lot of people do use food for comfort, emotional eating. It's like you say, physiologically makes you feel better in the short term, but in the long term, you feel rubbish, you feel, feelings of guilt. So yes, there's that element of comfort eating. And in terms of diets, the word diet, it's short-termism. We need to be looking at making those fundamental positive changes in the way that you're eating, the way that you view food. And again, going back to making eating joyful again. And also, I think Sunita made a really good point. She re-educated herself about food. And I presume you may have taken some kind of guidance on that as well, because it's easy to Google things and follow influencers, but there's so many diet myths and confusion out there, and you can just go round and round in circles and actually be very confused.
I just knew what I'm like as a person, and I love cooking and I love entertaining. I needed something that was going to work in my lifestyle.
Yeah. So what did you do? What did you do? Some sort of program?
I just looked at food and I thought, okay, if the earth provides it, it's going to be good for me. So I would say 80% of my shopping is full of fruit and veg.
Fantastic.
And lots of fresh meat. I haven't eaten a processed meal since the first week in August last year, 2018.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. We wish you all the best for moving forward. We really do. Thank you for sharing. Have we lost perhaps the idea of how important food is and how much work we need to put into prepping?
I think with meal prepping and planning, that's really critical. I work with a lot of busy parents, families. It's really important to be cooking in the family home. It means that children understand where food comes from. So, I watched a documentary where I think Jamie Oliver was holding up an aubergine and children were calling it a potato, and just understanding what different vegetables are. That's really important, that we start to educate our children about food, where food comes from, because if they think that food is pre-packed and comes off a supermarket in Tesco, I think, already childhood obesity rates are through the roof, as we know. I think it's 20% of 11-year-olds.
Yeah, and I mean, obesity in Britain, I think it's 2/3 of people are classified as obese.
It's a huge public health issue. And I think in terms of meal prep and planning, I think it's critical. I've actually done a podcast on it. And we even in my workshops, we do a lot of meal prep, meal planning. People actually need a bit of support on that front.
Of course. I mean, I think it was probably the same Jamie Oliver documentary. There's a moment in that where he asked a classroom of kids. He says, I want to know, just shout out, what is your favourite ever meal? If you could eat anything, what's your favourite ever meal that you've eaten? And one of the kids, the first thing they say is, pot noodle.
I do think food manufacturers do have a lot to answer for. If you look at the marketing of high sugar, high fat, kind of junk foods, they are disproportionately represented in the media. And actually, I completely agree with Nicole. Actually, the marketing to children for unhealthy foods, be it cheese strings or really high sugar yogurts that have Peppa Pig on them, this is all really contributing to the public health issue.
So you'd want to see more regulation of advertising?
I think we're already going down that path. I mean, we've got the sugar tax, which has been really has really worked, and it was an incredible initiative by Jamie Oliver, and that's really helped with with taking sugar out of food. We need more of that. And I'm not really one for regulation, but I think when public health is at stake, I don't think the government have any choice but to regulate and trying to encourage people to eat better food.
I hear that. So encouraged. Sonia, welcome to the Asian Network. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
That's good. I understand you've got some questions, haven't you?
So basically, I have a really unhealthy relationship with food, and there's so many different diets out there and eating plans, and they might conflict on each other, and it's all sort of intimidating. So I just wanted some ideas on which way to go about it, and what is the idea of being able to lose weight and sustain a nice healthy weight.
Aarti, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. There are general foundation principles about what comprises a healthy diet. And you probably know a lot of these. And actually, we would have to drill down into what would work for you, because you've got the kind of general broad concepts and then what would be personalized for you. So it'd be things like, are you eating complex carbohydrates as opposed to refined carbohydrates? So by that, I mean sort of slow release carbohydrates versus fast release carbohydrates, your cakes, pastries. Then I'd be thinking about what kinds of proteins you're eating. So if you're animal based, kind of good quality meats, if you're vegetarian, beans, pulses, that sort of stuff, whether you're getting right amounts of good fats in. So those are your macros. And the really key thing is, are you eating lots of colourful vegetables, eating the rainbow? We've said that phrase quite a lot. There's the your 5 a day message, but actually I think, it should be 6 a day, and 6 a day, and and it should all be vegetables, and then you can add the fruit. Yeah. So 3 portions of vegetables at lunch, 3 portions at dinner. And then, so that's kind of the diet front. But of course, in order to lose weight, which is what you're talking about, you also need to be thinking about physical activity. That doesn't mean kind of going really hard at the gym, but doing things that you enjoy, because I think you have to, for things to be sustainable and for you to achieve your health goals for the long term, which is so critical on people's health journey.
It's just trying to break that habit. And I think there's so many people out there that struggle with the same situation. And it's inspiring to hear all these people doing so well and so sure of themselves and finding things that work for them. But it's just breaking that habit in the first place, which is really difficult.
Of course, Aarti.
Yeah, there was another thing. I think, especially for women, support is really key. And actually, a lot of the studies show that people that join sort of like a slimming club, I'm not really a fan of the weigh-ins and all of that. That seems a little bit harsh sometimes, or it can be motivating. It's a double-edged sword. But actually having a support group, getting people that you love on board. You mentioned your sisters, and that can really spur you and give you the motivation. Because I think any journey that you're doing alone is always going to be harder. So finding people that you think that can take you on this journey, support you, motivate you, especially when you're feeling down, I really think that could be quite transformational for you.
Sonia, I mean, I guess the key thing is this is going to be, and I think we've heard this a lot, it's going to be part of a journey. It's not a switch that you just flick and then everything falls into place. And so I think the key message is, I think it's fair to say, we've been talking about fad diets and the perfect diet. Just to go back to your question, Sonia, is there such a thing as the perfect diet?
Again, if it's a goal-orientated journey, or whether it's for Nicole, it's a lifestyle. So we've got to look at it from different perspectives.
Absolutely. Sonia, I hope that's been helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Thanks for getting in touch. Guys, we're going to wrap this up in a moment. I just want to run through a couple of things. I don't know if you saw this week, Jamila Jamil was online and she was tweeting because someone... It wasn't the cupcake thing, actually. It was she'd seen someone tweeting about a water fast.
I think the water fast thing, personally, I think it's a bit of a fad, but I would say that when it comes to fasting, everybody copes differently without food. There's some really good clinical research around like autophagy, so cell renewal, and giving your digestive system a break. So there's some really good research about it. But I think what people shouldn't do is jump on the bandwagon. Try it out if you want. You know what? If you want to experiment, just be kind of mindful of how you're feeling after doing that. You know, like I said, you know, there isn't a one size fits all. We are all, you know, biochemically unique, and we need to kind of respect our bodies and how it responds to different foods, different ways of eating. Give it a go if you want, but you know, whether it's good or bad, like
is it sustainable? It's the whole idea that
it's certainly not sustainable. But if you wanted to do a water fast for 2 days every month, and that works for you, then you know,
what would
why
the
not?
benefits of that be?
I mean, some people find that, you know, they feel like they have more energy, more mental clarity when they're fasting. In the short term, they might feel a bit dizzy. They may feel a bit nauseous because they haven't got kind of, you know, the glucose supply. Once they kind of pass that bump and that difficult period, they often feel really good. But for some people, it's just not for them.
You've just got to be informed. If you have been affected by any of the issues we've been talking about tonight, or you want a bit of advice, you can always go to bbc.co.uk/action line. Guys, thank you so much. Please give yourself a round of applause.
BBC Asian Network.
Mobeen Azhar.